people, CzarThwomp here, and welcome to episode 59 of the Greatest Attorney 2 Resolve. Last time, we met with Van Zeeks, who told us about how Genshin actually saved his life before the whole professor thing really blew up. And then we also learned that Gregson is actually the Reaper of the Bailey, that he was orchestrating just a bunch of hits on people who would basically be acquitted during Van Zeek's trials by having Asasheen, aka Jeziel Brett, do his dirty work for him. And now we're gonna get going. We're gonna head over to... We're gonna be talking to... Where is it? Okay, Lord Chief... No. Where's the Fresno Street? Prosecutor's office. Second of November, Prosecutor's office. Kazuma. Don't judge me for... Yeah, too bad it's not 10 o'clock, otherwise I would make the drinking at 10 o'clock joke. I thought it would be long before you paid me a visit, Ryunosuke. Behold, my improved theme song. I was right about what I said, wasn't I? Sorry? You have all the makings of a great defense lawyer. Well, I always believed that you'd fulfill your dream of advocating in the British courts. I just never imagined for 1 second that it would be as a prosecutor.
Seeing you stand in a foreign courtroom so gallantly realizing your dream, Kazuma-sama. I'm truly happy for you.
And I am truly thankful for you, Judicial Assistant Mikatoba. Ryunosuke, I always thought it would be fun for you and I to shake up the British legal system a little together. This isn't quite how I envisioned it, but I suppose it's just another twist of fate. I learned a lot of things during my time in London. About Susato-san's father was himself a visiting student here once, along with Judge Chigoku, and about what happened with your father. Then you'll have no difficulty understanding why I had no choice, why I had to find a way to get to Britain as a visiting student myself. I want to hear it from you, Kazuma. As you wish, Ryunosuke Naruto. Examine everything. Lord Van Zeek's fine collection of hollowed chalices and bottles, all neatly lined up. Yes, he's extremely particular about all of that. He made me polish them individually by hand, and I had to kiss each one. Did you know that each one has a name? He has a strict regimen for everything, from the storage of the casks to the bottling of their contents. Gosh, you must be having a really tough time of it being his apprentice. Actually, no. Oh? He's so particular about it all, he refuses to let anybody else touch any of it. Partially because he was paranoid because he thought the Nipponese would poison it. He would actually go on long rants about how the Nipponese were trying to poison the water supply. In fact, he has an entire chapter dedicated to it in his book, Fighting the Rising Sun, My Eternal Battle Against the Nipponese Menace. So it's been quite easy for me, in fact. Talk about weird. Chess. There's Lord Van Zeek's incredibly stylish desk. It's not my style, though. No, I noticed you've been working at the little table on the floor, kneeling down Caesar style. I thought it was some kind of punishment set up by Lord Van Zeek's when I first saw it. You will sit at the kitty desk, my land assistant. I find it the most comfortable way to work. I can't do it. After a couple of minutes of sitting with my legs folded under me, they start to go tingly. Don't exaggerate, Ryunosuke. We both know you can't even manage a minute. Aw, no chess talk. Ryunosuke and his talks of shogi. Do you know who the man in this portrait is? Why would I? What? But you're Lord Van Zeek's apprentice. Yes, apprentice, not friend. And during the time I was suffering from amnesia, I didn't even notice that picture. Oh, really? I mean, it's not the smallest picture. I wouldn't have the first idea what the man decorates his office with. Crime scene. I love how they have a little Greg. I love how they dressed up the little Gregson figure like Gregson. What the? It's a scale model of the crime scene. Oh yes, I realize that. Does the prosecution office make a model of the scene for every single case? Apparently so. Sometimes it helps to visualize things better and notice things you hadn't spotted before. Actually, the miniature notice board is my work. Be honest, you enjoyed making that. Yeah, frankly, I could just imagine Edgeworth trying to do that sort of thing himself. Edgeworth would try and fail every time he would try and make a miniature model of the crime scene. Because we all know Edgeworth can't do basic cutting. Edgeworth actually was driven to tears in his elementary school years because of that. And Larry basically was better than him at it. And that probably haunts Edgeworth's nightmares to the present time. Okay, we can check out the desk. Let's check out the hollowed casks. Casks floor to ceiling, just like the last time we were here. Hollowed barrels, I suppose. They're arranged according to vintage, flavor, and region. Every week, they're all taken out and put back in order. What? Every week? Lord Van Zeeks can't seem to settle on the perfect way of arranging them, you see. Vintage, flavor, and region don't neatly coincide. That's the trouble. Gosh, being his apprentice must be a real challenge. In that case, basically, you do it in the order of vintage first, basically, just seeing how old the wine is. And then, from there, basically, you categorize them into the different flavors. And then from there, you go region. Actually, no. Oh? He considers the task too important to trust to anyone else, so he does it entirely on his own. Yeah, Van Zeek's just hucking all of those barrels of wine, throwing them like Donkey Kong. So he's a barrel of laughs here and in court then. The bats. Wow! You disturbed the bats, did you? Fitting companions of Lord Van Zeek's, wouldn't you say? Actually, I've seen things flying in Lord Strongheart's office too. Doves, I think? Perhaps you have to like birds to attain rank in the judiciary here. Though bats aren't birds, exactly. Although bats aren't birds, of course. They're winged creatures, though. How about a sparrow for you? What's that supposed to mean? Oh, nothing. Sorry. Just thinking out loud. Yeah, and that's revealed that basically Blackwell is a descendant of Kazuma. That's where Taka came from. Basically, Kazuma spread his line that one day his family would have a prosecutor with a bird. Okay, we've checked out everything in the office. Got a barrel of laughs as a result, and I forgot to turn the timer on. Okay, let's present the badge. Kazuma, this is your armband. Actually, I think it's yours now. Sorry? You're the defense lawyer. You have a talent for it. I've always known that you would. And now you've chosen to take that path in life. As your friend, I couldn't be happier for you. Or more proud. Kazuma. So you keep hold of that and bluff like you haven't bluffed before. Besides, I'm a prosecutor now. That armband would have no meaning for me. Well, if you're sure. Thank you, my friend. Anything to say about the Redheaded League? I was shocked when I found out they were related to the case. The Redheaded League, I mean. Personally, it wasn't their plan to swindle everyone that surprised me. It was the fact that so many redheaded people gathered from all over London that day. A certain great detective being among them. I expected those two are in their cells as we speak, wishing they'd never dreamt up their little plan. Or maybe they're busy plotting their next one. Okay, let's see. Commemorative photograph. Let's see if he has anything to say about this. Kazuma, what do you make of this? There's only one place where defense lawyers and prosecutors should discuss evidence. The courtroom. So it seems you're still confused by the situation. That's what I make of it. I get the feeling my friend's always going to have an edge on me, isn't he? Okay, photograph of the victim. Yeah, nothing to say about your about basically photos of Kazuma. Yeah, you don't have any. Sorry, about Danzig's. Why can't I speak? Why can't I speak? Your disappearance. It's getting on for a year now since what happened on the SS Booyah. We were headed across the oceans from Japan to Great Britain when a bizarre series of what? I think they were trying to say series of coincidences. When a bizarre series of coincidences led to those tragic events. I thought I lost my best friend forever. I must have been unconscious for a long time. When I awoke, I was lying on a bed. It was a narrow little room. There was a posy of flowers by the pillow. It took me a little while to realize that I was in the cabin of a ship. I slipped out of the room and headed up onto the deck. Were you already suffering from amnesia at that point? Yes, I didn't know what had happened or where I was. There was just this voice in my head. You have something to do, something no one else can know about. Go to Great Britain, your task awaits there. It was a calling I couldn't ignore. It compelled me relentlessly. Out on the deck, I saw that I was on a huge steamship and we were docked in a large port.
It must have been Hong Kong.
Yes, it must have been. Presumably just before they were due to carry... Yes, it must have been. Presumably just before they were due to carry your body off of the ship. I had no idea of the situation, but I did have the feeling that this was in some way my last chance. So I concealed myself among the disembarking passengers and went ashore. Then I disappeared into the crowded streets of that foreign port city, so I could plan my onward journey to Great Britain. The journey, the misadventures of Kazuma. Just under a year ago, with all my past memories lost to me, I was left behind in Hong Kong. Everything was foreign to me. The sights, the sounds, the smells. My head reeled. I was truly at a loss. I realized now that I had escaped as a dead man, with nothing but the clothes on my back. No money, of course.
Oh, how terrifying for you.
Luckily, though, I had 2 feathers in my cap. One being your knowledge of English, I suppose. That's right. And on the back of that, I was able to pick up some work as a deckhand on a cargo ship. Eventually, after calling at countless ports, I finally arrived at Dover. That must have been some 3 months ago now. Your formidable tenacity of purpose showing itself again. I mean, this man had lost his memory and had literally nothing to his name. But he still managed to make his way to London on the opposite side of the world. Of course, I had no idea why I'd moved heaven and earth to get here at that point. So, how did you end up becoming Lord Van Zeek's apprentice then? That can only be answered by an extraordinary stroke of luck, really. You see, I was stopped at the border because I had no papers. They took me straight to Scotland Yard, and by sheer coincidence, Lord Strongheart was there to attend a meeting. That's when the second feather in my cap came into play.
Would that have been your knowledge of law?
Yes, exactly. Lord Strongheart was curious about an Easterner with an intimate knowledge of British law. He took me back with him to the Supreme Court and assigned me to the prosecutor's office. And then, 9 days ago, you finally got your memory back after the trial involving Drebber. Yes, I did. The father. Ever since I met you at Yumai, you talked about your dream. I will be a choreographer. I will do dance routines. Mark my words, Rinisuke, I'll be chosen as a fitting student and make my way to Great Britain someday. Did you know the entire time about what happened to your father here? 16 years ago. When my father left on that exciting trip to Great Britain, I was just a boy. We took a photograph together the day before his departure. It's my last memory of him. But what I remember most about my father is his unwavering, unswerving sense of justice. 6 years after he left, a gentleman called at our family home. He told me that Genshin, my father, had been taken ill in England and passed away. It was Professor Mikitoba, your father, Susato-san.
Oh my!
He lied to me as he has lied to you. Ever since then, the professor was very good to me. He even helped to fund my university education at UMI. I'll be forever in his debt. But nevertheless, I just couldn't bring myself to believe what he told me.
Oh!
Then one day, a letter arrived at our house from Britain. There was no indication of the sender, so I opened it assuming it was from an old acquaintance of my father. What I read in that letter changed my entire life. What did it say? It said that my father had been a mass murderer, and the writer cursed the Asogi name.
Oh no!
And I said, screw that! The only one putting out curses is me. As a result of that letter, I found out what had been hidden from me all those years. Presumably, the letter was sent from a relative of one of the victims. And if whoever it was had been a member of the judiciary, he could have been present at that closed trial. That letter revealed that my father had been sentenced to death, executed for being a killer. I'm so sorry you had to find out that way. I imagine the British government did its very best to silence whoever sent that letter. But someone who knew the truth and couldn't bear the resentment was always going to be a problem.
But still, it could have been written by anyone. Why would you believe such a thing?
There was a newspaper cutting included with the letter. It was the first I'd ever heard of the professor and his terrible killing spree.
Well, what did my father have to say about the letter?
I couldn't bring myself to show it to him. What? Why not? Because he deliberately concealed the truth from me by telling me my father was taken by a fatal illness. That couldn't have been easy for him, and he'd done it all out of consideration for my feelings. So instead, I showed the letter to Judge Jigoku. To the other visiting students. He faltered for the briefest of moments, but then he just laughed the letter off. But in that moment, I saw it on his face. He was undeniably shocked, shaken momentarily before recovering his poise. A year later, my bereaved mother succumbed to the strain of grief, and she too passed away. That's when I made up my mind that one day, without fail, I would cross the sea to Britain and seek the truth for myself. The truth about my father, Genshin Asogi. And I wouldn't let anyone stand in the way.
Oh, Kazuma-sama.
The trial. What we have learned today in court turned things completely on their head. It was an impressive piece of lawyering, Ryunosuke Naruto. Sorry, had another loogie. Lord Van Zeeks isn't the Reaper, you know. I almost don't want to believe it myself, but it turns out that Inspector Gregson himself, the victim, was. It's clear that the Inspector was behind the Reaper's activities all along. What? You mean you knew? The real question is, who's been giving orders to the Inspector? Yes, Barok Van Zeeks is the real Reaper. And I know that 10 years ago, it was him who decided my father must be a mass murderer and sent him to his grave.
No, he was merely saying that justice was done as the law dictates. He's not to blame.
Ultimately, it's people who condemn people. The law is just a tool that they use to do it. And when a man condemns another, he must take responsibility for his actions. Of course he must. But I know for certain that my father would never have taken another man's life. Kazuma. On the contrary, my father's life was taken by the Reaper. And then Van Zeeks, why would I want his life? What would I want with it? I didn't want it too. Just no. Okay. Anything else? Okay, I have a feeling that there's more to this. Let's see if we can move back to the hospital area. Okay, hospital bed. Okay, yeah, there is something new here. Good. St. Steiner's Hospital, Ward 3.
This is the ward where Mr. Vigil was by, apparently.
To be frank, I'm a little worried about seeing him again. Ah, the lawyer. Hello again.
Are you feeling better now, Mr. Vigil? Ah, yes. Thank you. So much better.
I'm sorry to have caused you to, it was because of me. If I hadn't exposed your secret and forced you to remember things you obviously tried to forget. The prosecutor was here until a few moments ago, too. You just missed him. Oh, Kazuma beat us to it.
He said much the same as you. He was very apologetic. But the truth is, I brought all this upon myself.
Please, don't think like that.
Keeping it from Evie, my wife. All these years, I've carried such a sense of grief, guilt. But that's not the worst of it. Over time, I obviously came to deceive myself as well. You mean about your dismissal? Looking back now, I'm beginning to think that perhaps Inspector Gregson didn't stumble across me by accident at all. He compensated me so generously for acting as his stand-in. He was clearly concerned for my well-being and doing what he could to help.
So perhaps Gregson knew exactly what had become of Mr. Vigil all along then.
I'm sure this is just desserts for 10 years of lies and deception, but... It wasn't me that helped the professor escape 10 years ago! It wasn't me! I swear it! I swear it's true! Oh, Mr. Vigil.
I'm sure you'd rather not dredge up even more from your past at this time, but if possible, could you tell us exactly what really happened?
I want to. I need to get this off my chest. I just want someone to tell me what I should have done.
Anything? Yeah, let's see what you have to say about the Redhead League. Mr. Vigil, would you mind casting your eyes over this?
My head, it's throbbing. Oh no! It's too soon, Mr. Naruto. It's much too much for him.
It's too much for me seeing him swoon like that. Maybe I should lay off the evidence for a while. And why is he putting his hand on? Is he using the text box to support himself? Because how is he balancing himself with that hand? I know that they're basing it off of when he was in court, he was using the stand as basically a way of holding himself up, but here it's kind of creepy. Just, what is he using to steady his hand? How is it so steady right there? It's like his hand is locked in position, he's just orbiting around it. Like his hand is a fulcrum. Okay, can we examine anything? Okay, we check that out, check that out. Okay, everything is examined from the look of it. Converse, Gregson's request.
Inspector Gregson was obviously engaged in a special operation of some sorts. He was investigating something that even Scotland Yard couldn't know about.
Details of the Reaper's marks, yes.
It was when he had to carry out those investigations that I would take his identification and impersonate him.
You'd pretend to be the inspector and carry out investigations on his behalf.
Oh no, never! A common street battler couldn't possibly carry out a proper police investigation. All I would do is go to the specified location and make a little hoo-ha. Just something to leave an impression, so everyone there would think a detective called Gregson was here. So, that's what you were doing on the day prior to the incident? Yes, he asked me to make an appearance at the park on New Lime Street for the Redhead League event. So, as usual, I flashed the inspector's identification around and was very vocal about my presence. But then you were taken prisoner by those red-headed fraudsters! Yes, they tried to turn me into a femboy. Yes.
So you would always make a point of showing Gregson's identification and generally being loud. Well, that's what the inspector asked me to do, yes.
Well, that's one way of becoming a legendary detective, I suppose. Not a good one, though.
And as you know, I suffered this bruising around my neck at their hands. But the following day, they kept their word and released me.
Without returning the inspector's identification to you, however.
We had arranged to meet in the Fresno Street room in 5 days so that I could report back to the inspector. But at the agreed time, that's when I heard the gunshot.
Prison escape.
It was at midnight on the 17th of June 10 years ago. That was the time scheduled for the execution.
But the professor's execution never actually took place, did it?
Or rather, the execution itself must have been used to effect the plan of escape. I hardly dare to imagine what a chilling plan it was. Barok was renowned for being the highest security prison in the country. Everything that went in or out of the place was searched multiple times. But there was one notable exception. Or rather, one notable loophole. Something that was never questioned.
I have a feeling I know what that loophole was now.
The coffins into which the bodies of the executed convicts were placed, correct?
The coffins into which the bodies of the executed convicts were placed, correct?
Yes. Once the coroner had confirmed the death of a condemned convict, the body was taken in its coffin for immediate burial in Lowgate Cemetery just behind the prison. The chief warders first had to sign the necessary papers. After that, no member of the staff was permitted to touch the coffin containing the body again. When execution took place, only the executioner and the coroner were permitted inside the chamber. I would wait in the adjacent room for word that the condemned convict was dead. On that occasion, once I had that confirmation, I went into the mortuary to find a lone coffin, as usual. The procedure was that I would sign the paperwork, having checked the coffin, then nail it shut. But for some reason that day, the coffin was already nailed shut.
No!
I didn't think anything of it at the time. I assumed that my deputy must have checked the coffin and nailed it shut before I arrived.
So, you mean the coffin contained...
Yes, I can only imagine that Asogi, having escaped his execution somehow, was alive inside the coffin. The coffin was then taken out through the main gates and disposed in Lowgate Cemetery. Presumably there wouldn't have been enough air inside to breathe for long.
So in the early hours following the burial, somebody dug up the coffin again to set Genshin free.
But in the end, he was fatally shot in the graveyard anyways. What on earth really happened in Lowgate Cemetery that night, I wonder? I'm afraid I really don't know. All I can say with certainty are two things. Asogi couldn't possibly have escaped that way without help from somebody working in the prison. And that somebody was not me.
Obviously, you knew the man then. The professor, I mean. Genshin Asogi.
Yes, I remember him well, in fact.
Would you mind telling us what you know?
Well, having been condemned to death as he was, any contact I had with the man was short, obviously. After that trial, which was carried out behind closed doors, attended only by the elite members of the judiciary, they called for his execution to be carried out at the earliest possible opportunity.
The outcome of the trial was set from the beginning, wasn't it?
It was a time of delicate diplomacy when Britain and Japan were in the process of signing an important treaty. That means that this potentially destabilizing case had to be dealt with swiftly and discreetly.
The man had less than a week in total. As I was the chief warder, I oversaw his short stay in the cells until his final hour. I remember being struck deeply by his noble character and incredible resilience.
What do you mean exactly?
He was a killer of many men, but he was always quiet and polite. He was a gentleman and a man of intellect. In fact, I couldn't bring myself to believe what he had done, so I asked him one day. Those 5 members of the aristocracy whose lives were taken, were you really responsible?
I'm guilty of the unforgivable crime of ending another human's life. Yes.
The following day, the closed trial took place, and the verdict was no surprise.
Guilty.
That night, when he was brought back to his cell, I saw something unusual.
Something unusual? What?
The last will and testament of Genshin Asogi. As I said, it was on the night following his trial, after he'd been found guilty. I was doing the rounds of the cells, and when I looked into Asogi's, I noticed that he seemed to have a sheet of paper in his hand.
Ah, his last will and testament then, presumably.
As soon as he noticed me, he hurriedly shoved it behind his back. But why did you find that so unusual? Isn't it normal for a man to pen a will when he knows his death is nigh? Yes, that's true. But there were special conditions to Asogi's incarceration, you see.
What sort of conditions?
Well, even though he was held in a cell designed for condemned inmates, he was allowed to keep his personal effects with him, with one exception.
Really? He was allowed his things? That's unusual, certainly.
Of course, he'd been convicted of killing 5 members of the aristocracy, but at the same time, he was a guest in our country from the Empire of Japan. The powers that be were determined that his final day shouldn't be needlessly uncomfortable. And what was the exception you mentioned to the personal effects he was allowed? That's the point. He wasn't permitted to have writing materials. Specifically, no pens or paper.
Well, they didn't say anything about blood and stone. Hey, whittled into paper, I don't know. Maybe he basically did some super Asogi power where basically just using the Asogi talents. Using the Asogi tenacity, he made the wood in his bed into paper.
So he was prevented from having any written records of what had happened to him.
Yes, that was the long and short of it. Yet he was allowed his katana for some reason. I've no idea where he obtained that paper. Any writing materials would have been confiscated from him upon his incarceration. As I said, he hid the paper behind his back, and then he pleaded with me. What did you just hide behind your back?
Please, turn a blind eye. This is my lifeline.
But you know it's against the rules.
You're the only person who's seen. If you just agree to keep quiet.
All right then. But what's on that paper?
A last will and testament. This will is the only weapon I have left now. How can a will be a weapon?
So I decided to pretend I'd seen nothing and let him keep his will. But then later, it just seemed to vanish without a trace.
What? What do you mean, it vanished?
It would seem that it isn't the end of the story of this mysterious will.
The will's disappearance.
I was the only person who saw Asogi's will,
but somehow it disappeared.
It was after Asogi's execution.
Which was actually an elaborate jailbreak.
The warders gathered up Asogi's possessions that were in his cell. They were all to be sent back to his family, home in Japan, you see, in CzarThwomp burping.
To poor Kazuma-sama.
And you're saying that it wasn't anywhere to be found among his personal effects? The will, I mean?
That's right, though I didn't search through them myself. But Governor Caden was livid. He was screaming, "It can never have disappeared completely!"
That doesn't quite make sense, though, does it?
In what way?
Well, we understood that only Mr. Vigil was aware of the will's existence. In which case, how did the prison governor know to look for it?
Oh yes, you're right. I really don't know how he knew. What he said, but certainly seemed as though he knew of the will's existence from the outset. Only he didn't refer to it as a will. What he said was... the Asogi Papers.
The Asogi Papers?
I really can't tell you anything of the subsequent events. Because, well, what happened?
Your dismissal? And the way you blocked it all from your memory?
I'd forgotten all this until today. I don't suppose it's relevant to the case, though.
Well, anyways, thank you very much for sharing it with us, Mr. Vigil. We're very grateful.
I'm afraid there's really little more I can tell you. My wife Evie will be here shortly, so I do hope I don't appear rude, but...
No, not at all. Thank you again.
But what will become of you now?
Well, impersonating a police officer is a criminal offense, of course. I imagine that once I'm fully recovered, I shall be arrested.
I'm so sorry.
Don't be, please. This was all my own doing. I always knew that this day would come.
Well, I wish you well. Goodbye, Mr. Vigil.
Ah! Now, before you go, there's just one more thing.
Oh, yes? What is it?
The Asogi Papers. I'd be very grateful if you'd make no mention of the things I told you about them.
Presumably for some good reason?
It's my understanding that their very existence is a closely guarded secret. If it became known that I'd remembered, well, it could be rather troublesome, I think.
I understand. Some sort of will that Genshin Asogi penned just before his death, which the man himself claimed was his last weapon. I wonder, perhaps it had something to do with his plan to escape. If there's anyone who might know more about a document that Kazuma's father left behind,
It would be Mr. Vigil's governor! Now we know precisely where we must go. Back to Barclay Prison.
Okay, anyways, I think now would be a good time to end things off. Anyways, I really appreciate that you stuck around to watch this episode. You're a great viewer, and I hope you come back for the next week. If you like this video, like, subscribe, comment, share, do whatever you want. With that, I'll see you next time. Bye.